Hi, I'm Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty. Thank you for joining us for our podcast, We Don't Have to Choose. Today, we're going to talk about extreme risk protection orders, or ERPOs, as some people call them, also referred to as red flag laws. 2023 was a very active legislative session here in Minnesota. And there were many bills passed, but one of them was a brand new bill, brand new law in Minnesota, the Extreme Risk Protection Order. And in 2023, as 2024 was approaching, every town reached out to me and asked me if we needed help implementing the ERPO law. At that point, there was so much going on. There was other legislation. I wasn't entirely sure how we were going to implement it, what it meant to implement it. So I said, yes, absolutely, please help. So we're going to have a conversation with Raina and Bridget about how our office has implemented the Extreme Risk Protection Order and the ways we've expanded its use over the years. Hi, Raina.
Hi.
I think, as I recall, I think I might have mentioned that every town had reached out to me. And I really had no idea. I wasn't that familiar with the law.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Deanna here in the office, and I said, I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure we need help on this. And your name came up. Can you tell people what you were doing at the time?
Yeah, so I was working for a small nonprofit called Standpoint, and they give legal advice to domestic and sexual violence victims. And as part of that, we do a lot of training and a lot of technical assistance. And so I had, right when the law was passed, it was one of those things that advocacy was very, very interested in. And so I had been working on training and doing training for advocacy around ERPOs, along with all the other stuff that I was doing training on at the time.
And so we were lucky enough to hire you to come here. And my instructions were not very specific. You're laughing about that. They were somewhat like, hey, Raina, help us figure out this law. And I knew that part of it was law enforcement. I think it was pretty clear to me and all of us that there wasn't any, the law was coming into effect in 2024, and people were not entirely sure how it was supposed to be implemented. So what did you do when you came in here?
Yeah, so when I first came in, I met with a number of the chiefs to have conversation about what are you guys seeing, how are you guys using it? Because I started in June of 2024, so some ERPOs had already been issued. So I wanted to talk to those chiefs who had already applied to find out how's the law working, how's this going?
And just for people who might not be familiar with Hennepin County, it's Minneapolis and its suburbs. There are some 38 different chiefs, entities, law enforcement entities.
Correct. Yeah. And then the sheriff's department,
Yes.
right? So we have a lot of different law enforcement happening in Hennepin County. So I met with chiefs, had conversations with them. I met with the bench to find out how the bench was handling it in Hennepin County. Our family court bench is actually hearing all extreme risk protection orders. So I met with that bench. We are really lucky in Hennepin County. We have an attorney who supports the family court. So I met with her name is Lila. I met with court administration. So wanted to first kind of get my hands around what was happening with most of the people, the biggest chunk of people who'd be doing ERPOs. And then after conversation with the chiefs and with other law enforcement, started working on a sample policy that they could take and use for being able to implement for their offices.
So what is an extreme risk protection order?
Yeah, so an extreme risk protection order is an order that is issued by a court when somebody is a danger to themselves or others with a firearm. They're being what the statute says, a significant danger. So it is a temporary order that removes firearms from somebody if they have them, and also it prohibits them from buying or possessing firearms going forward for the max of up to a year. It can be anywhere from 14 days to a year, depending on what's going on. And so they are super helpful in situations where you may have somebody who's suicidal and they're making threats about harming themselves with a firearm, or you may have somebody who's making threats about harming other people, whether it be a significant other or whether it be people in community.
So who can ask for one?
So in Minnesota, our statute says that law enforcement can ask, a city or county attorney's office can ask, or a family or household member. And it's a narrow definition, but it's spouses, former spouses, parents and kids, people who currently live together, and people in romantic or sexual relationships.
And you mentioned that it was temporary.
Mhm.
How does that work? Because I also know that when it first came about, and maybe there's still some resistance to it, but that there wasn't due process. So what does that look like?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of due process. So when somebody decides to file for an ERPO, they fill out paperwork that you can find on the Minnesota court's website. They fill out paperwork, they submit it. It goes then in front of a judge, and the judge reads the petition and determines whether or not they feel that, based on what has been said in that petition, that somebody is a significant danger to themselves or others with a firearm. If they agree with that, they would sign then an order, which is called an emergency ex parte order.
Meaning, when it's ex parte, meaning it's just one side.
Correct. So at this point, just one side has presented their information to the court. Well, technically, we don't have to have another hearing. Like, you could get that order and it would be for 14 days and then it would go away. Most people want an order that lasts longer. And if you do, then you'll have a hearing within 14 days. The respondent gets served, the petitioner and the respondent show up in front of the court. So we have a hearing. It's actually virtual here in Hennepin. We'd have a virtual hearing, and the judge will listen to the parties, take evidence, and make a decision based on clear and convincing evidence on whether or not the respondent is a significant danger to themselves or others with a firearm.
And then how long would that period of time be?
Then that would be a year.
Okay, so you mentioned, so the firearms don't remove themselves.
Correct.
So how are those firearms removed from somebody who might be a significant danger to themselves or others?
Yeah, if somebody has firearms and the court has information that somebody currently possesses firearms, law enforcement is able to get a search warrant to be able to go and remove those firearms from somebody. Otherwise, the person has 24 hours to turn them over to law enforcement or to a FFL.
So you mentioned that you don't necessarily have to have a firearm.
Correct.
It can also prevent somebody from buying a firearm. How does that work?
It works exactly the same. Obviously, there wouldn't be a search warrant component because they don't own a firearm. But it works the same. And what happens is that when the order is processed through our court administration, they enter basically a check mark in a federal database. It's called NICS, but they enter a check mark. And so then if somebody, say, goes to Shields or goes to a Fleet Farm and tries to purchase a firearm, when that background check occurs, they're going to get flagged as somebody who's not able to purchase a firearm.
And that's where the red flag reference comes from.
Correct.
And I recall that we did have a case, or there was a case in Hennepin County that involved just that. Can you tell people about that?
Yeah, it was actually really early on. And it was a family member, in fact, who had gotten this order. They were very worried about their family member who was saying some things about suicide. So they obtained the extreme risk protection order. It was granted. That flag, that check mark, went into NICS. And even before law enforcement had a chance to serve the order, the respondent tried going to Shields, I believe, to purchase a firearm. Shields did the background check, saw that she was flagged, told her, "I'm sorry, we can't sell you this firearm." She was like, "Why?" And they were, "You're going to need to go talk to law enforcement." And that's how she then found out that there was an ERPO.
So why does that help?
The idea about ERPOs is that it's just giving time and space, right? We all go through difficult periods in our life. And sometimes we consider a permanent solution for something that's temporary. And so giving somebody some time and space away from a very lethal method to get help, to, to get therapy, to get sober, to whatever, can be really, really helpful.
So it may be that giving that person time and space by eliminating their ability to get a gun just might save their life.
Correct.
So we mentioned that we have a lot of different law enforcement in
Mhm.
Hennepin County, different suburbs, cities, and also the sheriff. What were some of the challenges you faced coming in trying to organize Hennepin County's response?
I think mostly it's just there are so many,
Mhm.
and that being able to reach everybody and having those conversations, and and also we have a lot of smaller departments, right? We have some very small departments in Hennepin County, and so for a number of them, they needed to figure out that like this does happen in our community. And it does, and so once it happens, them knowing I'm here to help you, and then moving forward at that point.
Law enforcement across the state,
Mhm.
actually, and this is, I'm sure, true across the country, had some resistance to the idea that they may have to go in and execute a warrant to somebody who clearly, or at least it's believed, they have a firearm.
Mhm.
How did you work with them about that particular issue?
I remind them, you guys do this, right? This is something you already do. Use all of those skills and all that knowledge you already have and apply it here. For some respondents, being able to serve them and then ultimately potentially doing the search, call them up, say you have this order you need to serve them. That works a number of times.
And that means people actually voluntarily surrender.
Either they voluntarily surrender, or at least you can get them served, and then they're out of the house and figure out next steps. But just rely on all your training and your expertise. You guys do this. I know you know how to do this. So just rely on those things. And this isn't all that different. And when you remind them, they know that. So that's often how those conversations go, and it's all good.
So after a couple of years after the fact here, how is the process working here in Hennepin County?
Yeah, so we've been growing and making, we've been expanding what we're doing here. So at first it was me, and I was really focused on getting training out there. Still doing a lot of training, figuring out different folks that need training, because the law touches a lot of different folks. But I probably was about 6 months in, and I was like, we need an advocate. I was like, we really need somebody to help that family or household member to be able to file. Just like orders of protection and harassment restraining orders are complicated for somebody who isn't familiar with the law, the ERPO statute is complicated. So we needed an advocate. So our office did a lot of work, and we got Bridget, who you're going to talk to in a little bit. So that was exciting. And then we, in January of this year, we expanded it even farther. We're now, in certain cases, I am filing on behalf of the county attorney's office, where that makes sense, where I have the right information and those things. So we've expanded it beyond just training and technical assistance to also our office.
And I know the legislature put in the family member, in part because there are just some people who are hesitant to go to law enforcement.
Yep.
And so I imagine that that's been a big learning curve for the family member. Like, how do I do this thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what Bridget is really great at, helping the family member figure it out.
So what does the data look like now compared to when we just started?
This year, so far in Hennepin County, we've had 43 ERPOs that have been filed. We are, as opposed to last year at this time, I think we were in the mid-20s. So we are ahead of schedule, or ahead of last year, and significantly ahead of 2024. I believe I have filed 6 of those 43. I have one, actually, I filed in another county. And I think between Bridget and I, we filed 25% of the ERPOs in Hennepin County this year. So yeah, and our law enforcement, I really feel like have really embraced it. We have a lot of departments in Hennepin County, and a lot of our departments have filed ERPOs and find them to be really helpful in a variety of circumstances.
That's great news.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just talked to Raina Alexander, who was talking about how our ERPO process came into being here in Hennepin County. And now I'm going to talk to Bridget Liverica, who is an advocate who helps household and family members. So I'm here with Bridget. Bridget, can you talk about your role in the office?
Yeah, so I was hired a year ago as a legal service specialist or advocate to assist the attorney's office in assisting family and household members in that discussion of extreme risk protection orders on whether, it's a good idea they should file or maybe they should hold off, like the pros and cons. And then I also do training and technical assistance with one of our assistant attorneys, Raina. And then also I was hired to, work with some mental health. So sometimes if someone has a family or household member that is concerned about their, the other person gaining a firearm and they have mental health concerns, I do have some background in mental health and disability waivers. And so I can help them get them some services as well. And then also there is a hearing component to the extreme risk protection order. So I do discuss that option or just the process with the petitioner as well. And then we do have a referral source for Central Minnesota Legal Services if that petitioner is experiencing domestic violence with a firearm as well.
So how do household members or community members come to you?
So several ways. Raina and I have spent, the good portion of our past year making sure we're getting out into the community. So I've gotten referrals directly from law enforcement. So they're embedded social workers. I've gotten some referrals from them. I am stationed at the Domestic Abuse Service Center. So anyone can call.
So can you tell people a little bit about DASC or the Domestic Abuse Service Center?
Yep. So DASC is our Domestic Abuse Service Center. We are located on the A side on the 14th floor
Of
the government center. Yes. And then anyone can come in or they can call and then, they can meet with an advocate. And if they're experiencing, domestic violence, they can ask for order for protection. And then those advocates are informed to ask if they've had any violence with a firearm. And then they can either, they message me and I can come and join that call right away, or maybe, come in an hour after. And then also we've met with school districts. So if a school, social worker would like to get a hold of me, other mental health professionals within the county as well can make referrals.
Because somebody who might be eligible or law enforcement or a family member might want to get an ERPO if somebody is maybe threatening a school.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep.
So you mentioned something interesting that some people that you talk to people about whether getting an ERPO is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So that says that in some cases it may not be. The same way getting an order for protection may not be a good thing for that particular person.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what are the pros and cons that you talk to people about?
So when I talk about like the pros and cons, a lot of the time it has to do with, someone experiencing domestic violence. So for example, if they're living with their partner and they're living in the same home and that home has, unsecured firearms. And so we don't want to have that person experience any type of retaliation. And we want to make sure. So sometimes the con would be the extreme risk protection order might get granted by a judge prior to the order for protection because they are two separate orders. And we don't want the extreme risk protection order only is regarding firearms. And I say to people, it's only firearms and firearms only. So this does not give you yourself, your children, your home, your dog, any protection. And so we want to create a safety plan. So maybe that is you do the order for protection first, and then the other party gets removed from the home, and then we would do an extreme risk protection order. Sometimes when I meet with people, they don't want to do a hearing. And that is, completely understandable because if you do an order for protection, as long as you don't choose certain components, you don't have to do a hearing. extreme risk protection order, if you do choose a long-term order, the hearing is required.
And that even though, as Raina said, that's online or virtual,
Mhm.
the other person still, you have to still be
Yes.
on it,
Yep.
seeing the
Yep.
other person.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
also the other person, if you file for one of these, is going to know that you
Yes.
asked
Yep.
for it.
Yep. Yep. And also extreme risk protection orders are public. So I also tell people that. So, their petition can be seen, just in the remote MinCro. Not that anyone's like searching for their name, I explained, but it could, come
Mhm.
across. And again, they are going to be the petitioner. And so they might not want to feel like they're, going to get more retaliation with that situation as well.
Are you finding that more people in the community are aware of IRFOs?
Yes, I am just, I think we're getting there, I guess I would say. I think people in, kind of like my personal like awareness, because more of my friends and colleagues are more into like mental health and social work, so they do know about it. But I would say, it's great that we're doing this podcast because more like people in the general public that aren't in social work, that aren't in mental health or, domestic violence, probably don't know this order exists.
Yeah, it's been something that I've talked about in the community too, and it's been surprising. I know we had press conferences, but I was
Mhm.
trying to
Yeah.
get the word out there, and it still is something that people aren't aware of. So
Mhm.
one of the reasons of talking about this is to get that awareness out there, so
Mhm.
that people know it is a tool that's out
Mhm.
there for them
Yes.
if it seems to fit their needs.
Yes. Yeah.
So, what could you tell us some situations that you have worked through with people or things that
Mhm.
stand out in your mind?
Yeah, I have a couple that stand out. Regarding domestic violence. I think a lot of the petitioners they don't know about it until maybe they come to the Domestic Abuse Service Center, or they go, they're maybe talking to another nonprofit that has another advocate and they get referred to me. So no, we did have a family or household member that they did do their order for protection and they got that granted. And then the other party had firearms at their parents' house in a different area, and that person was concerned about them going to get those firearms and harming them. And so we were able to do an extreme risk protection order, get the search warrant component, and then have the firearms removed. So then that person was able to have, their order for protection, so protecting them and their home, and then also, they don't have to, they can be a little more not nervous about the firearms. So, and then, mental health is a big component. And so, we had a family or household member that did come to me, and then we filed. And then when police got there, they did find the firearm reassembled with a bullet in the chamber. And so that was one where we were trying to act very quickly and preventing suicide as well.
Yeah, and that reminds me. So, how quickly can this happen?
So I am able to, when family and household members file with me, I have gotten an order granted, I think probably 45 minutes. And then depending on the police department, Raina and I are able to coordinate and let them know that it's been granted and let them know that this is coming. And in that case, we did have the contact with that police department and they were able to go pretty quickly within the next day. So, yeah.
How, and Raina mentioned that we are trying to expand. What would that look like?
Just like, for training and everything. Yeah, I think, doing some more community events. I think Raina and I are going to go to Pride in the end of June. And so we'll be able to get out there and do the community. Also, we're meeting with schools. And so I think the end of August, once they can get all their training, we're going to be able to train a few more of the school districts in here. And then the Department of Public Safety too, working with them to get more community and let us know or let them know we're here.
And if there's somebody out there, some organization or person that's really interested in understanding this, what should they do?
They can contact, they can contact DASC or they can contact our office. We have an ERPO email. It's just erpo.ca@hennepin.us.
Could you say that again?
Sorry, I know I said it fast. erpo.ca@hennepin.us. And that is an email that Raina and I both share. So they can ask for training anytime.
Is there any, so those are people that are interested in training or maybe a household member?
Yep.
Can they also use that?
Yep, anyone can use that. So, if anyone, any family or household member, it's on our community flyer, they can use that. Police departments, if they're saying that they have, someone they're concerned about, and the family or household member would probably be the better person to talk to. Doctors, psychiatrists, if they need some consulting. And, in addition to filing, I've consulted with like other police departments. I actually consulted with community member who was talking about one of their neighbors and kind of what they should do about that as well. So,
And
yeah.
we have used them regarding neighbors as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, people have, if someone wants to file with their, like this person, I'd refer them to law enforcement. Yeah.
And that may be somebody that's having some issues with their neighbor. They're worried that
Yeah.
that neighbor poses a significant
Yep.
possibility of harm.
Yep. Yeah. And then I also, refer, like we have COPE. And then if you live in Minneapolis, we have the Behavior Crisis Response Team. So as well, that can help.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
You've now heard from Raina and Bridget about the Hennepin County Attorney's Office efforts to work with law enforcement and community members on ERPOs, or extreme risk protection orders. They can be life-saving tools. So please contact us if you just want to know about them, if you want a group to have training about them, or you just want help. If you come to DASC, you can just show up. No appointments necessary, and our team will meet with you and meet you where you're at. Thank you.